She told her mother to wait up for her. That was the last thing Trudie Adams said before she walked out the door into a winter's night in Sydney, Australia, in 1978. She was 18 years old, full of life, planning a trip to Bali, and by all accounts happy. She never came home. Her mother waited, and waited, and the hours stretched into days, then decades, and still nothing. No body ever found. No conviction ever secured. No real closure for anyone who loved her. Before we dive in, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. If you enjoy true crime stories like this, be sure to like the video, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and share it with someone who'd love it too. Welcome to Cold Case Chronicle. Today we are looking at one of Australia's most haunting and unresolved disappearances, the case of Trudie Adams, a teenage girl who vanished from Sydney's northern beaches on the 25th of June, 1978, and whose fate remains officially unsolved to this day. This is not just a cold case. It is a window into a time when a pattern of serious crimes against women was ignored for far too long. It is a story about a community that carried a dark secret beneath its sun-drenched surface. And it is a reminder that behind every unsolved case, there is a real family still waiting for answers. Sydney's northern beaches in the 1970s looked like paradise on a postcard. Long stretches of white sand, surf clubs, open skies. Places like Newport, Avalon, Mona Vale, and Barrenjoey were known for their relaxed, sun-soaked way of life. Young people gathered at surf clubs on weekend evenings. Hitchhiking was a completely normal and accepted way to get around. Public transport in the area was limited, and young people regularly thumbed rides along Barrenjoey Road without a second thought. But underneath that easy, carefree image, something darker was happening. Between 1971 and 1978, a series of violent sexual assaults had been taking place in the area. Young women, some as young as 14, were being targeted while hitchhiking or walking alone at night. They were being forced into vehicles, blindfolded, handcuffed, driven into bushland, and assaulted at gunpoint before being left behind. Most of these women did not report what had happened to them. The era's attitudes towards women, reporting, and being believed made that almost impossible. So the crimes went unrecorded. The perpetrators went unchallenged. It was in this environment that Trudie Adams grew up. And it was in this environment that she disappeared. Trudie Jeanette Adams was 18 years old at the time of her disappearance. She was a student at a business college and lived with her family in the Northern Beaches area. Those who knew her described her as bright and free-spirited, very much a typical teenager of her time. She had been planning a trip overseas and was looking forward to her future. Stephen Norris was Trudie's boyfriend at the time, though their relationship was in the process of ending. He was the last known person to see her alive and became an early focus of the police investigation simply due to proximity. He later attended the coronial inquest in 2011 and has consistently maintained he had nothing to do with her disappearance. Neville Brian Tween, also known by the alias John David Anderson, is the prime suspect identified by investigators. He was a career criminal with a history of serious offenses. In 1975, he and a co-accused named Gary Batt were convicted of abducting and sexually assaulting a man in bushland near Mona Vale Road, the same general area where Trudie vanished. Tween later became a significant drug trafficker and, notably, a police informant. He died in prison in 2013 without ever being charged over Trudie's disappearance. Mark Standen was a senior law enforcement figure who rose to become assistant director of the NSW Crime Commission. He had a documented and close relationship with Neville Tween, for whom Tween had served as a police informant over many years. Standen was arrested in 2008 on unrelated charges, conspiracy to import large quantities of illegal drugs, and was convicted and imprisoned. Investigators and journalists later raised serious questions about whether Standen's relationship with Tween may have shielded the prime suspect from scrutiny over the years. Detective Senior Constable Gavin McKean was the cold case detective who took over Trudie's case in 2008 and spent years preparing for the coronial inquest. He was the first detective to formally interview Neville Tween about Adams' disappearance. McKean told the inquest he believed Tween was responsible for what happened to Trudie. The Roseland lads were a separate group of men who were also investigated at one point. They owned vehicles linked to the case and were reportedly in the area on the night in question. Witnesses alleged that members of this group made threatening references to Trudie Adams. However, all members of this group denied any involvement, and no charges were ever brought against them. On the evening of Saturday, the 24th of June, 1978, Trudie Adams got ready to go out. She left her family home around 7 o'clock in the evening. She hitchhiked to a friend's house. That was simply how people got around in that area, and then made her way to the Newport Hotel before arriving at a dance being held at the Newport Surf Life Saving Club. Her boyfriend Stephen Norris was also there that evening. The two were in the process of separating, and the atmosphere between them that night was described as somewhat tense. As the evening wound down, Trudie decided to leave and make her own way home. She did not wait for a lift from anyone she knew. She stepped out alone, walked to Barrenjoey Road, and began hitchhiking. In the early hours of Sunday, the 25th of June, 1978, just after midnight, Stephen Norris followed her to the road and watched her get into a vehicle. According to Norris, the vehicle was a light-colored, possibly fawn or beige, 1977 model Holden panel van. There were at least 2 people inside the van. That was the last time anyone who knew Trudie Adams saw her alive. When she failed to come home, her family and Stephen Norris reported her missing on the 25th of June. 5 days later, Trudie's mother, Connie Adams, received a disturbing phone call. A male voice said simply, "Trudie is dead. You will find her about halfway up Mona Vale Road." It was an accident. The exact same message was delivered to Mona Vale police. Officers launched a massive search across 400 square kilometers of dense bushland. Trudie was not found. On the 16th of August, 1978, the New South Wales government offered a reward of $20,000 for information about her disappearance, a significant sum at the time. In 1992, the case was reopened with a fresh focus on a green combi van that had been seen in the area. That line of inquiry ultimately did not produce results. In 2008, 30 years after Trudie disappeared, NSW Homicide Squad Commander Detective Superintendent Jeff Beresford announced the formation of Strike Force Keldy to reinvestigate the case. The reward was raised to $250,000. Detectives stated publicly they believed Trudie had been abducted, sexually assaulted, and murdered by at least 2 men. In 2009, for the first time, cold case detective Gavin McKean sat down and formally interviewed Neville Tween in prison. Tween denied any involvement. McKean later told the inquest that when he presented a specific hypothesis about how Trudie may have died, he observed what he described as a visible shift in Tween's demeanor, a moment of what the detective interpreted as unspoken acknowledgement. It was not enough for a charge. In 2011, a coronial inquest was held at Glebe Coroner's Court. It was presided over by Deputy State Coroner Scott Mitchell, with Peter Hamill SC assisting the coroner. The inquest heard extensive evidence over a number of hearings. Before we continue, we want to hear your thoughts. If you have theories about this case or questions about the investigation, drop them in the comments below. Keep it respectful. And make sure you stay until the very end of this video. There are some critical details in the closing section that put the entire case in a new light. In the days following Trudie's disappearance, something significant happened. Young women began coming forward in numbers to report crimes that had never been reported before. These women described being targeted while hitchhiking in the same Northern Beaches area. They described 2 male attackers, aged around 30, who wore disguises, false beards, wigs. The victims had their eyes taped shut, were handcuffed, and were driven into bushland at gunpoint before being assaulted. Afterwards, they were threatened and released. Police eventually identified at least 14 women who had been assaulted in this pattern between 1971 and 1978. An additional attempted attack on a hitchhiker occurred earlier on the very same evening Trudie disappeared, suggesting the perpetrators were already active that night. Investigators noted that after Trudie's disappearance, Neville Tween relocated from the Northern Beaches to NSW's Central Coast. The pattern of serial assaults in the area stopped around the same time. The original investigation faced significant obstacles. First, because so many of the assault victims had never reported their crimes, investigators in 1978 were unaware of the full scale of what had been happening. Second, the early investigation was clouded by confusion over the vehicle involved. Some witnesses described seeing a green combi van in the area. Stephen Norris, the key eyewitness, stated clearly that he saw Trudie enter a light-colored Holden panel van. This discrepancy, a green combi versus a fawn panel van, created confusion that persisted for decades. Third, and perhaps most troublingly, Neville Tween was never formally questioned during the original investigation despite the striking similarities between his known criminal behavior and the pattern of assaults. Investigators later concluded this was a significant failure. A classmate of Trudie's named Carolyn Drake told the coronial inquest that earlier on the same evening, she had picked up Trudie hitchhiking and dropped her home, warning her that it was not safe to hitchhike alone at night. Within hours, Trudie was hitchhiking again. During the reinvestigation, detectives from Strike Force Keldy made inquiries not only across New South Wales, but also in Queensland, Victoria, and New Zealand. Bodies of water and areas of Ku-ring-gai Chase National Park were searched on more than one occasion. No physical remains have ever been located. Several critical moments defined how this case developed, and several represent lost opportunities that may have changed everything. The first is the failure to pursue Neville Tween in the years immediately following Trudie's disappearance. By 1978 and 1979, police had information linking a suspect matching Tween's profile to numerous attacks. The fact that he was never interviewed at that stage is now considered a serious failure of the original investigation. The second is Tween's documented relationship with senior law enforcement. Through the 1990s and into the 2000s, Tween served as an informant, meaning he was providing information to police in exchange for a degree of protection and goodwill. His handler, Mark Standen, rose through the ranks to become one of New South Wales's most powerful crime investigators. Journalists from the ABC who investigated the case in 2018 obtained letters written by Standen from prison, which confirmed the closeness of his relationship with Tween. The letters revealed that the two families had lived streets apart on the Central Coast during the early 1990s and shared local amenities. Investigators and journalists have raised direct questions about whether this relationship kept scrutiny away from Tween for years. Whether that constitutes deliberate interference or simple professional blind spots remains unclear and unproven. Mark Standen's own fall from grace in 2008, when he was arrested for conspiracy to import a large quantity of illegal drugs and later convicted and sentenced, removed him from a position where he could have protected anyone. It also, coincidentally, removed a major obstacle to the reinvestigation of Trudie's case. Another turning point came with the anonymous phone call to Trudie's mother in the days after the disappearance. That call, a male voice calmly saying her daughter was dead and directing searchers to Mona Vale Road, has never been definitively linked to a specific individual. It suggested someone had direct knowledge of what had happened. Yet it produced no breakthrough at the time. The official position, as determined by the 2011 coronial inquest, is that Trudie Adams died as a result of homicide or, in the alternative, misadventure. The coroner stopped short of naming a perpetrator, but the inquest clearly placed Neville Tween at the center of suspicion. Detective Gavin McKean stated directly to the court that he believed Tween was responsible. The theory supported by investigators is that Trudie was abducted by two men on the night of the 24th into the 25th of June, 1978, taken into bushland, most likely within the Ku-ring-gai Chase National Park area, sexually assaulted, and killed. Police believe her remains are likely still somewhere in that bushland, never found. The anonymous phone call, in this theory, was made by someone with knowledge of the crime, possibly one of the perpetrators, or someone they confided in. The Roseland Lads theory is a secondary line of inquiry. This group of men from Sydney's south were in the area that night and owned vehicles linked to the case. A witness reported hearing them make a threatening reference to Trudie Adams. However, all members of this group denied involvement, and the inquest did not produce evidence sufficient to charge anyone from this group. Whether these two groups of men, the Roseland Lads and those connected to Tween, happened to be on the same road that same night, or whether their separate presence has been conflated over time, has never been fully resolved. The unanswered question of police corruption or negligence remains one of the most troubling threads. Was Tween protected by his informant status? Did his relationship with a powerful law enforcement figure grant him years of immunity from scrutiny? These questions have never been fully answered, and no formal finding of misconduct was made in connection with the Adams investigation specifically. What is not in question is this: a teenage girl disappeared. 14 other women were seriously assaulted. The prime suspect lived out his days in prison on other charges and died in 2013. No one has ever been charged with anything related to Trudie Adams. To date, no person has ever been charged, tried, or convicted in connection with the disappearance and suspected murder of Trudie Jeanette Adams. Neville Tween, the prime suspect named by investigators, was serving an 18-year prison sentence for conspiracy to import approximately $7 million worth of cocaine when he gave nearly 5 hours of testimony to the coronial inquest in 2011. He denied all involvement. He died in custody in 2013, taking whatever he knew to his grave. The coronial inquest concluded in 2011 with the finding that Trudie had most likely died as a result of homicide or misadventure followed by a cover-up. That finding carries moral and investigative weight, but it is not a criminal conviction. Without a body, without physical evidence, and with the prime suspect now deceased, the prospects of a formal prosecution have become significantly more difficult. The $250,000 reward offered by the NSW government remains current. Authorities have consistently emphasized that someone, somewhere, knows what happened to Trudie Adams, and that reward exists to encourage that person to come forward. The disappearance of Trudie Adams left a wound in her community and her family that never truly healed. Her father, Charles Adams, known to those close to him by the nickname Edge, attended the 2011 inquest alongside Trudie's brother John and her former boyfriend Stephen Norris. A group of her close friends also came to the court, hoping finally for answers. In interviews over the years, Charles Adams expressed with quiet dignity the kind of grief that comes not just from losing someone, but from never knowing. Trudie's mother, Connie Adams, passed away without ever learning what happened to her daughter. The case also changed something in the community. Hitchhiking, which had been so normal, so unremarkable, became something young women reconsidered. The image of the northern beaches as a safe and carefree paradise was permanently altered. Historians and researchers who have written about the case note that the disappearance exposed a dark reality that had long been visible to the women who lived there, a culture where sexual violence went unreported and largely unpunished. In 2018, the case re-entered public consciousness in a major way. The ABC released a podcast series called Unravel, with the second season dedicated to the Barrenjoey Road case. Investigative journalists Ruby Jones and Neil Mercer spent months retracing events and speaking with survivors, witnesses, and investigators. Their work uncovered new information, including letters from the imprisoned Mark Standen, and prompted previously silent witnesses to come forward. In addition to the podcast, the ABC broadcast a television documentary also titled Barrenjoey Road. In 2021, a 3-part documentary series called Who Killed Trudie Adams was produced and later made available on streaming platforms, continuing to bring new audiences to the story. As a result of this renewed media attention, women who had never before reported being attacked in the northern beaches area came forward to describe assaults that matched the pattern connected to Trudie's case. These voices, arriving 4 decades late, painted a picture of how widespread the violence had been and how invisible it had remained. The NSW Police Homicide Squad reviewed the case again following the podcast's broadcast. As of the time of this documentary's research, no new charges have been laid. The reward stands. The case remains officially open. What happened to Trudie Adams in those early morning hours on Barrenjoey Road is something many believe is known, held in the memory of people who have never spoken. If you think you might know something about this case, no matter how small it seems, New South Wales Crime Stoppers can be reached on 1-800-333-000. Callers can remain anonymous. Trudie Adams was 18 years old. She was a student. She was someone's daughter. She was planning a trip to Bali. She told her mother to wait for her. When we step back from the complexity of investigations and inquiries and legal processes and look at the simple human reality of this case, a young woman who stepped out on a Saturday evening and never came home, the weight of it is immense. More than 4 decades have passed. The men most strongly believed to have been responsible lived full lives and died without ever facing justice for what happened on that winter night in 1978. The 14 women who survived attacks in the same area during those same years also carry scars that no outcome can fully heal. Their experiences were ignored for years. Many of them only found the language and the courage to speak about what happened because journalists and investigators finally came looking. Trudie Adams deserves to be remembered clearly, not just as a case number, not just as a cold case subject, but as a person whose life was cut short, whose family paid an unimaginable price, and whose story still demands accountability. In cases like this, remind us why it matters to keep talking, to keep asking questions, and to hold on to the belief that truth, even when it is delayed, is worth pursuing.